Caleb, what did Josh Heupel say in his press conference that made you somewhat of a Joe doubter? Is that a good way of putting it?
Yes, because I
Okay.
can't ignore what I've seen on the field and what Heupel said.
Okay, what the H? What did he say?
So after the scrimmage, when he spoke, I think it was on Monday, he was asked just in general, what did you see from Joe Milton and Nico Iamaleava? He said a few things, but he started with Joe, and Nico was his second part. While still talking about Joe Milton, guys, this is very clear. This had nothing to do with them together. It had to do specifically with Joe Milton based on the context of the paragraph. He said, there's some things we can learn as far as clock management. Okay, that's a really red flag because we all know the one thing that I'm sorry?
No, you're right. That's a red flag, jumping out of bounds against the Rebels.
Running with a few seconds left, trying to run for a touchdown and then running out of bounds. Yes, that was a huge red flag because we already know Joe Milton may have an issue with clock management and lack of awareness of the clock.
That was a statewide red banner. That was more than a flag. I've never seen, I have never seen, I can't recall seeing a player do something, and I'm talking about the act, not the player, but the act doing something so stupid that he's turned into an incredible athlete at that position.
I have not seen that. I can. It was Jake Locker for the Titans one year against the Saints in 2011, but that's a different story for another day that I'm still mad at him.
I mean, it is possible, but I would be. General Nealon says, give the kid the keys. If we're not undefeated after Bama, developing a 6-year journeyman is pointless. No, I don't want to do that either. And I did at first until I heard the reviews of Nico, which were strong. So, no, I just think you should be willing to put Nico in there quicker than a lot of the people that are on our message board. Mr. Jones says the rule is changing for the clock stopping after first downs. That's what Hype is talking about.
That is not what he's talking about.
Yeah, I don't know, Mr. Jones. I think that's a little bit of a reach, to be honest with you, buddy. But I think that he is talking about clock management as a whole. And listen, my concern has always been and always will be when you see a player make that mistake in the game, are those mistakes correctable? Because there is something to be said for having an innate feel for the game. And the guy that jumped out of bounds against Ole Miss did not have an innate feel for the game, Caleb. And that's something that whether you're a Joe Milton lover, hater, or I believe like me, realistic and objective, that you can't just up and say that's going to get fixed. We don't know if that's going to get fixed.
Yeah, I agree. And for those that don't think this matters too much, go back and look at Hendon Hooker against Alabama with 15 seconds to go. These type of situations matter. Do you think for a second, Dave, based on what was said and based on what we saw against Ole Miss, do you think for a second Joe Milton would have been capable of that 15-second game-winning field goal drive? I don't.
To the point where I will tell you that I think that Tennessee probably would have not gone in that route.
Probably right.
I think they probably would have played for overtime.
And particularly because in that situation, even if Joe Milton would have completed the passes, we've already talked about his release is slower than Hendon Hooker's. Significantly slow. He probably wouldn't have thought to get rid of the ball as quickly as Hendon Hooker did, knowing that you only have a certain amount of time. I mean, Hooker, that was one of the big reasons I'm so high on Hooker in the NFL. That was a masterful 15-second drive. I think it's underrated just how aware he had to be of how much time was on the clock for each pass he made during that time. I mean, that was just masterful. I think Joe Milton is the exact opposite, and we saw that. And for Heupel to say we worked on some things like clock management, and by the way, he did not say that about Nico, guys. He only said that about Joe Milton. That's a huge red flag.
Yeah, but here's the thing you have to remember. He has less than a season. He should be okay at clock management with almost a full season playing, right? I mean, we're looking at 75, 80% of the season when you compare 2021 and 2022 times he had to play.
But you said it yourself. Isn't it about feel?
No, I'm with you. You shouldn't be having issues with that feel.
Like one of them ones, here's one you might remember. And I know you laugh at how I just randomly remember plays in the back of my head, but you covered that 2005 LSU comeback game, right? Were you in Baton Rouge for that one?
Yes.
Do you remember when LSU was up 21-0 at halftime and they had the ball near the red zone and they could have gone for more points, but Jamarcus Russell stupidly scrambled and then slid and ran out the clock?
Yes.
That right there was all I needed to know Jamarcus Russell was not going to be an NFL quarterback, because that was so next level dumb that he did that. And
well, I mean, you have to put the Ole Miss play in that level.
Yes, you do.
But you think he'll start the whole season. So where's the disconnect? Because I at least have said, based off accuracy issues pre-Vanderbilt game last year when he barely threw the ball and they had a totally different approach in the Orange Bowl where they threw over the middle, I've said I've said there's a realistic chance that Nico is the starter by September.
I think this is about, for Joe Milton, Heupel is going to sacrifice maybe a win, maybe even 2 this year. I'm just going to say it because
I'm laughing at Travis on the message board. Go ahead. He's just.
Oh my gosh, I'm reading the quote.
Go ahead.
I will say that Heupel, I think Joe Milton is such a leader and respected within the locker room. I think that, given the fact that I don't think Tennessee has a college football playoff caliber team this year, even if they snuck in because of their schedule, they get destroyed by whoever they played, unless it was TCU. But if they played, they're not ready for the Ohio States or the Georgias just yet. They're just not. And so I think that because of that, he might even sacrifice an extra win this year, or starting Nico early to develop him, because of how much Joe Milton has the locker room. Heupel doesn't want to lose the locker room before 2024, which is when I think Tennessee really emerges as returns back to, I guess, the blue bloods of college football.
Travis, go ahead.
No, I think that's why I think Milton is going to keep the job, because he won't do enough to lose it significantly.
Travis says the Hooker Show is officially pro LSU and anti Joe Milton. What in the world is happening? He said, typed with love. It is funny, though, that you brought that up, Travis, because I was considering writing a column about how LSU has its stuff together a little bit better than Tennessee, and that who they hired, which we could debate her history and not being a thorough part of the sexual assault investigation that went on at a previous stop. But also LSU's pro day was run tremendously better. They showcased their players while Tennessee was running around doing their best to get everybody at the line. So I was going to write that column, but I'm not now, Travis, comparing LSU to Tennessee's athletic department, because yes, go ahead.
That's so scary too, because LSU, the only thing that's kept them from being a dominant athletic program is they've been run by nothing but incompetence for 30 to 40 years. So the fact that there's a slight bit of competence now in the program, it's destined to be an elite athletic program.
LSU to me is Tennessee about 15 years before everything. So LSU was a dormant football program in the 90s. Tennessee was dormant in the 70s, early 80s, before Majors got things rolling. And then you had to build that football foundation, and you got better at other stuff. So they made a bad football hire in Will West. Not Will West, Will Wade.
That's basketball too.
Yeah. But they made a bad football hire as they're coming along. They made a bad basketball hire. The football program is doing well, so they feel like they should make better hires across the board. And in the end, they didn't make a good basketball hires. What I was trying to say, that reminds me of Tennessee making bad basketball hires. I think that their entire program is now coming along to the point where they can have more leverage and make better hires. Does that whole thing make sense? In other words, Tennessee's football program rose up about 10, 15 years before LSU's, and now you're seeing the rest of the athletic department at LSU catch up when I think they've already caught up at Tennessee.
Oh, I totally get what you're saying. The thing that was interesting to me, though, was Tennessee.
That was a bit of a reach there for a second. So,
well, there is a difference in this way. Tennessee, you do have to work at it to stay elite at Tennessee, because you do have to think ahead of the curve. You've talked about it in the 80s. Majors and Dickey were the first to say, let's schedule games in New Jersey and Boston and LA and whatever for national TV. Tennessee always had to think a little bit ahead of the curve on these things to make sure they stayed relevant. LSU's the reverse. In football, you have to work at it to not be successful in football at LSU. It's, again, I talk about it all the time. It's the easiest job. Proof in the pudding. Les Miles and Ed Orgeron won national championships. There's a reason Nick Saban stayed there, even though he didn't really like Louisiana.
I completely agree. And I think now that with the Will Wade hire and now with the Kim Mulkey hire, you're seeing what Tennessee had to do in the men's basketball side. They had to hire some guys, in particular Bruce Pearl, with a little bit of a questionable background because he, was involved in recording coaches that were supposedly recruiting players. So I think you're seeing that. I think to be able to hire Rick Barnes, a proven coach with much less baggage, was a great sign for Tennessee. And I think you'll see LSU get to that point. But when I saw their pro day and the way it was showcased in Tennessee's pro day, I just thought that LSU was a bit ahead of Tennessee in the way they packaged some things.